Have you ever had meddling in-laws? The kind who can't resist poking their noses into your business, offering unsolicited advice, and generally making your life a living hell? Well, let me tell you, I've been there, and it's no picnic. But what happens when you decide it's time to turn the tables on those meddling in-laws? Allow me to take you on a roller coaster ride through a tale of revenge, redemption, and rekindled love. It all began with a simple vow renewal ceremony, a seemingly innocent gesture to celebrate our love and commitment. Little did we know that it would set the stage for an elaborate plan to teach our in-laws a lesson they'd never forget. With every part of the story, you'll discover the intricacies of our revenge plot, the unexpected twists, and the moments of redemption that changed everything. So buckle up, dear readers, as I recount the story of how we packed our bags, handed over the house papers, and embarked on a journey that would forever alter the dynamics of our family. Intrigued? Well, watch the video to the end, because this story is about to unfold in all its glory. It all started when my in-laws decided they wanted me out of their daughter's life, pronto. But little did they know, I had a plan up my sleeve that would not only secure my place in their hearts, or not, but also have them second-guessing their brilliant idea. First, let's meet the cast of characters. There's me, Kevin, with a knack for turning the tables, and there's my wife, Jane, the love of my life. Then, of course, we have the antagonists of our story, my in-laws, John and Mary, who have made it their mission to rescue their dear daughter from my clutches. Let me regale you with the tale of how my relationship with my wife's parents went from mildly awkward to a full-blown sitcom, complete with scandals and intrigues. Hold on to your hats. It's going to be a bumpy ride. My journey into the labyrinth of in-law relationships began when I married the love of my life, Jane. Our whirlwind romance had been a fairy tale until I met her parents. I didn't realize it then, but they would turn our lives into a never-ending circus act. Meet Jane's father, John. He's the quintessential dad joke king, with a collection of puns that could make a stand-up comedian jealous. However, it's not just the puns, it's the timing. Picture this, Jane and I, dressed to the nines, ready for a romantic dinner, and out of nowhere, he'd chime in with a pun about forks, sending us into fits of laughter. "John, how do you come up with these?" I'd ask, genuinely baffled. He'd grin and reply, "It's all about being well-rounded." But it wasn't just the jokes, it was his obsession with antique cars. He had a knack for spotting rusty relics on the side of the road and insisting that he could restore them to their former glory. Jane and I had lost count of the number of weekends spent in oil-stained garages, surrounded by half-assembled engines and the distinct scent of motor oil. Then there's Jane's mother, Mary, the eternal optimist with a dash of eccentricity. She had an uncanny ability to turn any situation into a heartwarming Hallmark movie script. Once, we got caught in a torrential downpour during a picnic. While Jane and I tried to salvage the soggy sandwiches, Mary declared, "This is just like one of those romantic rain scenes in movies." "Mary," I said, holding a dripping PB&J, "I think they have umbrellas in those scenes." But the piece de resistance was her obsession with knitting. She was convinced that knitting could solve all of life's problems. Stubbed your toe? Knit a cozy for it. Lost your keys? Knit a keychain. She once spent an entire weekend knitting emotional support scarves for us, just in case we ever felt the need for an extra dose of comfort. As you can imagine, our interactions led to a fair share of misunderstandings and mishaps. John once decided to surprise us with an improved front lawn by planting a mini forest of cacti. Yes, you read that correctly. Cacti in our suburban front yard. "John," I sighed, "our neighbors are going to love this." He winked and said, "It's low maintenance, son, and a great conversation starter." Mary, on the other hand, was convinced that I had a hidden talent for knitting. So, she roped me into attending a knitting class with her. Picture me, surrounded by grandmas knitting sweaters for their cats, desperately trying to make sense of knitting needles and yarn. It was an experience, to say the least. Our relationship with the in-laws became increasingly strained. Every visit felt like an expedition into the unknown. John insisted on helping with household chores, which typically ended with him vacuuming the curtains and Jane and me trying to suppress our laughter. Mary, on the other hand, saw our home as a blank canvas for her crafting experiments, with glitter and glue making their way into every crevice. But the real trouble started when they decided that our love life needed a boost. Mary gifted us a book titled Passion Unleashed: Reignite the Fire. The cover featured a shirtless man holding a rose between his teeth. John, of course, couldn't resist adding his touch, a sticky note on the cover that read, "Read this with candles." I turned to Jane, exasperated, and said, "Your parents are trying to turn our bedroom into a shrine of passion." Our home had become a battleground of quirks and eccentricities. But little did we know that the climax of this sitcom was yet to come. One fateful evening, we returned home to find our living room transformed into what can only be described as a psychedelic knitting paradise. There were neon yarns hanging from the ceiling, hand-knit cushions strewn everywhere, and, in the center of it all, Mary sat with a giant ball of multicolored yarn. "Surprise!" she exclaimed. "I call it the knitplosion." I blinked, unable to comprehend the chaos. Jane, my partner in navigating this absurdity, whispered, "We need to do something before they turn our lives into a reality show." And so, we devised a cunning plan. We invited them over for a family meeting, where we gently explained that, while we loved their quirks, it was time for some boundaries. "We appreciate your creativity, but our living room isn't a canvas for artistic expression," I said. John nodded. "And I promise to keep my cacti in my own yard." Mary sighed. "I suppose I can knit less. Aggressively." Our relationships were saved from becoming a full-blown soap opera, but we couldn't help but wonder what scandal or intrigue the in-laws would unleash next. One thing was certain. Life with them was anything but dull. As I recount these tales, I can't help but smile at the absurdity of it all. In-laws can be a handful, but they also bring a unique flavor to life. After all, what's a good sitcom without a cast of quirky characters? But back to my story, our main dish. So, here's how it all went down. My in-laws invited us over for what they claimed was a family meeting. Red flag right there, am I right? I knew it was going to be an ambush, but I decided to play along. As we settled into their posh living room, John cleared his throat, wearing an expression that screamed, "I'm about to drop a bomb on you." "Listen, son," he began. "We've been discussing Jane's future, and we think it's best if you two take a break." I raised an eyebrow. "A break? You mean like a vacation?" Mary chimed in, her face as stern as a school principal's. "No, we mean a breakup. We believe it's for the best." I thought I'd misheard them for a second. A breakup? Really? But then it hit me. This was my golden opportunity. I nodded solemnly, pretending to be defeated. "I see. If that's what you think is best for Jane." Little did they know, I had an ace up my sleeve that would leave them speechless. As we left their house that evening, I made a quick stop at my attorney's office. You see, I had been preparing for this moment for months. I had discreetly bought a house in Jane's name and made her the sole owner without her knowledge. The next day, I sat Jane down for a heart-to-heart talk. I feigned sorrow, telling her that her parents' wishes had finally gotten to me, and I agreed to the breakup. But what I didn't tell her was that I had a little parting gift for my dear in-laws. As we met with them to break the news, John and Mary looked triumphant. "We're glad you finally see reason," John said with a smug grin. I nodded, fighting back a smirk. "Yes, we'll be going our separate ways, just as you wanted. But before we do, I have something for you." And that's when I handed over the house papers to my wife, effectively making her the sole owner of the beautiful house I had bought. Jane's eyes widened in surprise as she realized what had just happened. The expressions on my in-laws' faces were priceless. Shock, disbelief, and a dash of regret danced across their features. "Consider it a parting gift," I said with a wink. "You wanted us to break up, after all." The room fell into a stunned silence. My in-laws were left speechless, and I couldn't have been happier. Revenge was served, and it was delicious. Alright folks, time for continuation of this epic saga of revenge. If you thought things were spicy before, just wait until you hear what happened next. So there we were, my wife Jane and I, with the house papers officially transferred into her name. The look on my in-laws' faces was a mix of shock, anger, and sheer disbelief. It was the kind of satisfaction you can't put a price on, but I wasn't done with my grand plan just yet. As we bid farewell to John and Mary, Jane and I moved into the new house. Now, let me tell you, it was a beauty. A charming two-story home with a lush garden and a cozy fireplace. It was the perfect place for us to start our separate lives. But here's the kicker. I had secretly arranged for a housewarming party, and I was about to invite every nosy neighbor, friend, and distant relative we had. The plan was simple yet devious. We were going to act like the perfect couple, showering each other with affection and acting as if our breakup was just a minor hiccup in our love story. The invitations went out, and our guests arrived one by one. Jane and I put on quite the show, holding hands, whispering sweet nothings, and basically pretending we were still head over heels in love. I even went all out with a surprise gift for Jane during the party, a framed picture of us from our happiest moments together. As the evening went on, I could see my in-laws growing increasingly uncomfortable. They had expected me to slink away quietly, not throw a lavish housewarming party with Jane. Oh, the irony. The pièce de résistance came when I made a toast to our new beginning. I spoke about our undying love, our unbreakable bond, and how this house symbolized the fresh start we both needed. I could practically see the steam coming out of John's ears as he forced a smile. But the real twist came when I announced that Jane and I had decided to renew our vows right then and there, in front of all our guests. Jane looked at me in surprise, but I could see the spark of mischief in her eyes. She nodded, playing along with the plan. We improvised vows on the spot, promising to love and cherish each other forever. The guests cheered, and my in-laws were left utterly flabbergasted. They couldn't believe their eyes. Their grand plan to break us up had backfired spectacularly. As the night wore on and the party continued, I could see John and Mary slowly slipping away, their spirits crushed. It was a sweet, sweet victory, and revenge had never tasted so good. After our unforgettable housewarming party and vow renewal, my in-laws, John and Mary, were in shambles. It was clear that their scheme to break up Jane and me had fallen apart in the most spectacular fashion. But little did we know that they weren't going to give up so easily. Oh no, they had another card up their sleeves, and they played it like seasoned poker champions. A few weeks after our grand celebration, Jane and I started receiving invitations in the mail. They were for family counseling sessions with a renowned therapist in town. Apparently, my in-laws had taken it upon themselves to book these sessions for us, thinking they could fix our marriage. Now, I'm all for therapy and working on relationships, but this was just another one of their manipulative tactics. They hoped that by forcing us into counseling, they could control the narrative and push us towards divorce. But Jane and I were not about to be pawns in their game. We decided to attend these sessions, but with a plan of our own. We were going to be the model couple, the epitome of love and reconciliation. We'd show the therapist that we were committed to making our marriage work, even though it was all a charade. The first session was awkward, to say the least. We sat in that therapist's office, holding hands and sharing stories about our struggles. Jane shed a few tears for good measure, and I gave her a comforting pat on the back. The therapist, Dr. Caldwell, seemed genuinely invested in our well-being. He gave us advice on communication, trust building, and the importance of spending quality time together. Little did he know that we were following a script written by my in-laws. As the sessions continued, we played our parts to perfection. We laughed together, shared our innermost thoughts, and even went on a weekend getaway that we had no intention of enjoying. Our acting skills were top-notch, and Dr. Caldwell was eating it up. But then came the bombshell. During one particularly emotional session, Jane tearfully confessed that she had been having an affair. She looked at me with remorse in her eyes, and I put on a show of shock and heartbreak. The therapist was taken aback, and my in-laws must have thought they had finally won. However, our plan was about to take an unexpected turn. I decided to confess as well, revealing that I too had been unfaithful. The therapist was now in uncharted territory, faced with a couple who had both strayed but were willing to forgive each other. We spun a tale of forgiveness, redemption, and renewed commitment. Dr. Caldwell was baffled, but he couldn't argue with a couple who claimed to have found their way back to each other through forgiveness. As we left the session that day, I couldn't help but smirk. My in-laws' plan had backfired once again. Instead of tearing us apart, it had brought us closer together. And the look on their faces when we shared the good news was priceless. After our bombshell confessions at the therapy session, Jane and I continued our charade of reconciliation. We played the roles of a couple on the path to forgiveness and healing. Dr. Caldwell, our unwitting therapist, had no idea that we were manipulating the situation to our advantage. Our plan was simple yet diabolical. We would continue to act as the perfect couple, lulling my in-laws into a false sense of security. They must have thought they had won, that their meddling had finally pushed us over the edge. But we had a few tricks up our sleeves. We began dropping hints about a surprise we had in store for them, something that would prove our commitment to each other and silence their doubts once and for all. Curiosity got the better of them, and they couldn't resist asking about our mysterious surprise. With exaggerated enthusiasm, we told them that we were renewing our wedding vows, and we wanted them to be there to witness our recommitment to each other. Their expressions were priceless, a mixture of shock, guilt, and confusion. They had expected us to crumble under the weight of their interference, not come back stronger than ever, but they had no choice but to accept our invitation to the vow renewal ceremony. We spared no expense in planning the event. It was a lavish affair, held in a picturesque garden with flowers, music, and a guest list that included our closest friends and family. My in-laws had no idea what they were walking into. As we stood before our loved ones, Jane and I exchanged heartfelt vows, pledging our love, trust, and loyalty to each other. We spoke of forgiveness and the strength we had found in each other's arms. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. But the pièce de résistance was yet to come. After we exchanged rings, we made a surprise announcement. We revealed that we had decided to sell our house, the very house my in-laws had pressured us to leave. Their expressions shifted from confusion to shock as we explained that we were using the proceeds to embark on a year-long adventure together, traveling the world. We had turned the tables on them once and for all. The house they had tried to take from us was now funding our dream journey, and they were left speechless. As the ceremony concluded, my in-laws approached us, their faces pale. They tried to speak, but the words escaped them. It was the sweet taste of victory. However, the importunity of my meddling in-laws has not gone away, so I had to go the ingenious move that ensured they would never interfere in our lives again. After our extravagant vow renewal ceremony, my in-laws were a wreck. They had witnessed our love and commitment firsthand, and they knew they couldn't meddle in our lives any longer without facing severe consequences. But we couldn't rely solely on their newfound guilt. The day after the ceremony, Jane and I presented them with a surprise gift, an all-expenses-paid vacation to a remote cabin in the woods. We explained that it was our way of thanking them for their support and understanding during our challenging times. They were initially hesitant, suspicious of our motives, but we insisted it was a genuine gesture of gratitude. We assured them that we had put the past behind us and were ready to move forward with a clean slate. They reluctantly accepted the gift and embarked on their getaway, leaving us with an empty house to prepare for our year-long adventure. Little did they know that this cabin was strategically chosen. It was hours away from any cellular reception or internet access, effectively cutting them off from the outside world. As they settled into their isolated retreat, we sent occasional messages, asking if they were enjoying their vacation and assuring them that we were having a fantastic time planning our travels. Their replies grew less frequent as they immersed themselves in the peaceful surroundings, blissfully unaware of our ultimate plan. A week into their vacation, we received a message from them, admitting that they had realized the error of their ways and regretted their past interference. They confessed that they were now committed to giving us the space and privacy we deserved. It was the moment we had been waiting for. We replied with warmth and forgiveness, telling them that we appreciated their honesty and were willing to move past the past, just as we had promised during our vow renewal. They were overjoyed by our response and expressed their eagerness to make amends. And then, we dropped the bombshell. We explained that our year-long adventure was, in fact, a solo journey, just Jane and me. We told them that it was an opportunity for us to strengthen our bond and reconnect without any external distractions. Their shock was palpable through their messages. They couldn't believe that we had excluded them from our plans after everything they had done. But we reminded them of their newfound commitment to respecting our boundaries and assured them that we would return to them after our journey. As days turned into weeks, my in-laws remained isolated in their cabin, stewing in their realization that they had been outsmarted. We, on the other hand, embarked on the adventure of a lifetime, traveling the world, strengthening our relationship, and creating unforgettable memories. By the time we returned, my in-laws had undergone a transformation. They had reflected on their actions and genuinely changed for the better. They welcomed us home with open arms, ready to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of respect and understanding. And so, dear friends, we conclude our revenge tale with a twist of redemption. My in-laws learned the hard way that meddling in others' lives comes with consequences, but they also learned the value of respecting boundaries and cherishing the bonds of family. As for Jane and me, we emerged from this ordeal stronger than ever, with a newfound appreciation for the power of love, forgiveness, and a well-executed revenge plan. We hope our story serves as a lesson to all those who dare to meddle. Sometimes the tables can turn in the most unexpected and satisfying ways. Thank you for joining us on this wild journey, and may your own lives be free of meddling in-laws and filled with love and adventure.
All right, friends, buckle up because this is the story of how I discovered my wife's secret girlfriend getaways were anything but innocent. It all started when I stumbled upon a revelation that would leave you scratching your heads and reaching for your pitchforks. So picture this. My wife Emily and I have been married for 5 blissful years. Or so I thought. We met by chance. I was sitting in a cozy little cafe during my lunch break, desperately trying to avoid the pile of work waiting for me back at the office. As I sipped on my cappuccino, I couldn't help but notice a woman sitting alone at a nearby table. She had this captivating smile that could light up a room. Feeling a surge of courage, I decided to make my move. I casually strolled over and asked if the seat across from her was taken. She looked up, slightly surprised, and gestured for me to sit down. Score. We started chatting, and it turned out we had a lot in common. We both hated Mondays, loved cheesy movies, and had an unhealthy obsession with cats. It was like we were 2 peas in a pod. As our conversation flowed effortlessly, I couldn't help but be drawn to her infectious laughter. It was like music to my ears, drowning out the noise of the cafe. We exchanged stories and jokes, each one funnier than the last. It felt like we were in our own little comedy club. Time flew by, and before we knew it, our lunch breaks were coming to an end. Reluctantly, we exchanged numbers and promised to meet up again soon. As I walked back to the office, a goofy grin plastered on my face. I couldn't help but feel like I had just stumbled upon something truly special. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Our casual lunchtime encounter had blossomed into a full-blown romance. We explored new restaurants together, went on weekend getaways, and even survived a disastrous attempt at cooking a fancy dinner together. Let's just say the fire alarm got quite the workout. Naturally, after all this, we got married. Emily's job as an executive at a tech firm often left her stressed and in need of some girl time, as she put it. I didn't mind at all, in fact, I encouraged it. Everyone needs a break, right? These getaways happened every few months, and I was always cool with it. Her so-called girlfriends would rent a fancy cabin, hit the spa, and just relax. Emily would return refreshed, and our relationship benefited from it. Or so I believed. One sunny Saturday, I decided to surprise her at her favorite spa retreat, a place called Serene Haven. I had a bouquet of roses and a box of chocolates in hand, ready to surprise my hardworking wife. Little did I know, the real surprise was waiting for me. As I walked into the reception area of Serene Haven, I couldn't help but admire the posh surroundings. The marble floors, the soothing waterfall in the corner, and the impeccable service made it clear why Emily loved this place. I approached the receptionist, a young woman named Sarah, to inquire about Emily's whereabouts. "Hey there," I said with a smile. "I'm looking for my wife, Emily. She's here with her friends for a weekend getaway." Sarah looked up from her computer screen and gave me a polite smile. "Sure. Let me check for you. Can you please provide her last name?" "Of course, it's Anderson." Sarah's fingers danced across the keyboard, her eyebrows furrowing slightly. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't have any record of an Emily Anderson staying here this weekend." My heart sank. I thought there must be some mistake. "Are you sure? She comes here regularly with her friends for these spa weekends." Sarah hesitated for a moment, then leaned in a bit closer, as if sharing a secret. "I don't want to get anyone in trouble, but there is an Emily who has been a frequent guest here. However, she always checks in alone, and she's registered under a different last name." I blinked, trying to process this information. "A different last name? Are you saying she's using a fake name?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, sir. She goes by Emily Mitchell. But please don't mention I told you this. We value our guests' privacy." My mind was racing. Why would Emily use a fake name? And why was she coming here alone when she always claimed to be with her girlfriends? "I won't say a word," I assured her, my voice trembling. As I left the spa, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Emily had some explaining to do, and I was determined to get to the bottom of this mystery. Little did I know that my journey for the truth would lead me down a path of unexpected twists and turns. After my jaw hit the floor at the hotel receptionist's revelation, I needed to do some major sleuthing. If my wife, Emily, was sneaking around behind my back, I needed to know the full extent of her devious plan. Revenge, after all, required precise information. I slipped out of the hotel, leaving the poor receptionist baffled and bewildered. It was clear that Emily wasn't here for a girls' weekend, at least not in the traditional sense. I couldn't just confront her without all the facts, though. I needed to gather evidence like a seasoned detective. Back at home, I started my covert operation. I dusted off my old laptop, logged into my trusty social media accounts, and fired up my amateur detective skills. First stop, Emily's Facebook profile. I scrolled through her posts, looking for any suspicious activity. That's when I found it, a group chat with her so-called girlfriends. The conversation was filled with emojis, inside jokes, and laugh-out-loud anecdotes about their wild weekend adventures. But it was all a facade. The timestamps on the messages told a different story. Emily had been typing away furiously during the time she was supposedly out with her friends. My heart sank as I read messages like, "I can't believe we're getting away with this," and "He'll never suspect a thing." It was crystal clear that my wife was orchestrating an elaborate ruse, and her friends were in on it. But the burning question remained. What was the purpose of this charade? Why would she go to such lengths to deceive me? I needed more information. I knew I couldn't tackle this mission alone, so I reached out to my trusty sidekick and best friend, Mike. He was a tech whiz and had a knack for digging up digital dirt. We met up at our favorite coffee shop, and I spilled the beans on the bizarre situation. "Mike, you won't believe what's happening," I whispered, leaning in closer as if we were in some spy thriller. I recounted the entire hotel receptionist saga and showed him the incriminating chat messages. Mike's eyes widened as he absorbed the details. "This is some next-level deception, buddy. he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "But we can get to the bottom of this. We just need to be one step ahead of her." We hatched a plan to set up a fake business trip of my own, complete with fabricated messages and meetings. If Emily thought she could outwit me, she had another thing coming. It was time to turn the tables and unleash my own web of deceit. Revenge was a dish best served cold, and I was about to make it ice cold. As I typed out fake emails and sent bogus text messages to my unsuspecting wife, I couldn't help but smirk. Emily had underestimated me, but I was about to show her that two could play this game. Little did she know, the husband she thought she knew was about to become her worst nightmare. The stage was set, and my plan was in motion. I embarked on my so-called business trip, leaving Emily behind with a web of deceit so intricate, even I had trouble keeping track of it all. The key to my revenge lay in convincing her that I was away for an extended period, far from her prying eyes. I checked into a nearby hotel and sent her occasional messages about my meetings and work dinners. Meanwhile, Mike and I continued our covert operation, gathering more evidence about Emily's shady activities. We started by following her every move, discreetly of course. Mike used his tech wizardry to install a tracking app on her phone without her knowledge. We watched in real time as she met up with her supposed girlfriends, all while I was miles away, attending my fabricated business meetings. It was during one of these clandestine stakeouts that we stumbled upon something that sent shivers down my spine. Emily and her friends weren't just going for spa days and brunches. No, they were headed to a casino, and it wasn't for the slot machines. I watched as Emily entered the lavish establishment with a group of women dressed to the nines. The glitzy casino was a far cry from the innocent girls' weekend she had portrayed it as. This wasn't about spending quality time with friends. It was about indulging in a secret life of extravagance and thrill-seeking. As I observed her at the blackjack table, my anger grew. Her fingers tapped nervously on the table, beating out a simple melody. But now it didn't seem to me as cute as it was at the time of our acquaintance. I felt all her emotions. Taking a seat at the blackjack table, Emily exuded confidence, channeling their inner James Bond. She were dealt a pair of aces, causing their heart to skip a beat. This was her moment to shine, or so she thought. Filled with excitement, Emily made the impulsive decision to go all in, adopting the mantra of, "You only live once." The dealer raised an eyebrow at this bold move, but proceeded nonetheless. The cards were dealt, and a wide grin spread across her face. However, her joy was short-lived as the dealer revealed a blackjack. Panic and horror washed over her like a tidal wave. Flushed with embarrassment, Emily could feel the weight of the entire casino's gaze upon them. Her luck had quickly evaporated, leaving them feeling anything but fortunate. To add insult to injury, the subsequent rounds proved to be just as disastrous. Lady Luck had abandoned her completely. Every time they hit, they went bust. Every time she stood, the dealer miraculously pulled out a winning hand. It seemed as though the cards themselves held a personal grudge against Emily. I kept watching her crash. Emily was gambling away our hard-earned money, all the while thinking she had pulled the wool over my eyes. It was a betrayal that cut deep. I couldn't help but think back to the hotel receptionist's words. "Your wife is quite the gambler," she had said with a knowing smile. It all made sense now. Emily had been using these supposed weekend getaways as a cover for her reckless gambling habit, and her friends were her enablers. Mike and I decided to dig deeper into her financial activities. We accessed her bank statements, and what we found was shocking. Large sums of money had been withdrawn from our joint account and transferred to an unknown source. It was as if Emily was trying to hide her gambling losses by siphoning off our shared funds. It was time to confront her, but not before I had gathered enough evidence to ensure she couldn't weasel her way out of this one. Revenge was no longer just a desire, it was a necessity. My marriage hung in the balance, and I wasn't about to let her deception tear us apart. Armed with the damning evidence we had collected, I waited for Emily's return from her latest girls' weekend. Little did she know that the tables had turned and the game was no longer in her favor. It was time for the ultimate showdown, and I was prepared to reveal the extent of her deceit. As I watched her approach our front door, a rush of emotions washed over me. This was the moment of truth, and I was determined to make her face the consequences of her actions. Revenge, it seemed, was about to take center stage in our marriage. The door swung open, and there she stood, looking like she had just returned from another one of her innocent getaways. Emily's face lit up with a feigned smile as she saw me waiting for her. Little did she know that her carefully constructed facade was about to crumble. "Hey, sweetheart," she greeted me, trying to hug me as if nothing was amiss. I sidestepped her embrace, my anger bubbling just below the surface. "We need to talk," I said, my voice cold and unyielding. I motioned for her to step inside, and as she did, I closed the door behind her, sealing her fate. Emily's expression shifted from cheerful to uneasy as she sensed the seriousness of the situation. She glanced around, perhaps expecting an intervention from one of her supposed girlfriends or a hidden camera crew. But there was no escape from the truth this time. I gestured for her to sit down in the living room, a room that had witnessed countless moments of joy and intimacy in our marriage. Today, it would bear witness to something entirely different. I took a deep breath and began to lay out the evidence before her. Bank statements, photos of her at the casino, and the GPS logs from her phone tracking her every move during her weekend getaways were all presented in damning detail. Emily's face grew paler with every piece of evidence I revealed. "You've been lying to me, Emily," I said, my voice heavy with disappointment. "Those weekends with your girlfriends weren't what you claimed them to be. You've been gambling, and it's tearing our marriage apart." She stammered, attempting to come up with an excuse, but the evidence was irrefutable. The truth had caught up with her, and she had nowhere to hide. Tears welled up in her eyes as the weight of her deception pressed down on her. "I didn't think you'd understand," she finally admitted, her voice trembling. "I was just trying to escape the stress, to have some fun." My anger began to ebb, replaced by a profound sadness. I had loved this woman, shared my life with her, and now I was witnessing the unraveling of our relationship. The revenge I had sought suddenly felt bittersweet. "I wish you had talked to me," I said, my voice softer now. "We could have faced your problems together, but instead, you chose to deceive me." Emily wiped away her tears and looked up at me with a mix of regret and desperation. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her words heavy with remorse. The confrontation had taken an unexpected turn. My thirst for revenge had led me to expose her secrets, but now I was left grappling with the consequences. Our marriage was hanging by a thread, and the road to recovery seemed treacherous and uncertain. As we sat in the dimly lit living room, the weight of our shattered trust and broken promises hung heavy in the air. The battle for revenge had left scars on both of us, scars that would take time and effort to heal. Whether our love could withstand this ordeal remained an open question, one that only time would answer. The days following that tumultuous confrontation were some of the most challenging of our marriage. Emily and I faced each other with a mixture of anger, disappointment, and regret. Our home, once a sanctuary of love and understanding, felt like a battleground of emotions. We decided to seek professional help to salvage what remained of our relationship. Our therapist helped us navigate the treacherous waters of trust, communication, and forgiveness. It was a painful process, but gradually we began to rebuild the shattered pieces of our marriage. Emily took steps to address her gambling addiction, attending support groups and therapy sessions to confront the underlying issues that had driven her to deceive me. It wasn't easy, but I saw genuine remorse in her eyes, and that gave me hope. As for my quest for revenge, I realized that it had been a double-edged sword. Yes, it had exposed Emily's deception, but it had also nearly destroyed our marriage. I learned that revenge could be a destructive force, one that consumed not only its target, but also the one seeking it. Over time, as we worked on healing and rebuilding trust, I found it in my heart to forgive Emily. It wasn't a quick or easy process, but forgiveness was the only path forward if we wanted to salvage our relationship. One evening, as we sat on our porch watching the sunset, I took Emily's hand in mine. "We've been through a lot," I said, my voice soft and filled with emotion. "But I believe in second chances. I believe in us." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she squeezed my hand. "I love you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "And I'm so sorry for what I've put you through." We leaned in and shared a kiss filled with the promise of a fresh start. It was a moment of redemption, a moment where we chose to let go of the past and embrace the future together. Our journey wasn't without its challenges, but as the weeks turned into months, our love grew stronger. We rebuilt our marriage on a foundation of honesty, trust, and open communication. The scars of our past were a constant reminder of the price we had paid, but they also served as a testament to our resilience. Revenge had led me down a dark path, but it had ultimately brought us to a place of forgiveness and redemption. Our love had weathered the storm, emerging stronger than ever before. And as we sat on our porch, hand in hand, watching the stars twinkle in the night sky, I couldn't help but believe that sometimes, even the darkest moments could lead to a brighter future.